Hey folks, it's Jeremy Kirkland. You're listening to Blammo. How we doing, everybody? I'll be honest, bit of a week here, as one might expect, you know? For some reason, we're still getting tons of tornadoes coming through here. I'm not kidding. It's bizarre. While I was listening through this week's pod and getting ready to record and all that stuff, my computer and my phone just lit up with like take shelter or tornado warnings. It's nice, right? But we're all right. We're going to be fine. We're hanging in there. I had a weird weekend. And we'll do a little story. It's fine. I don't mind sharing these things. Folks seem to dig into them. But look, ever since my dad passed last year, I've really been trying to, be the good son. Make sure I'm taking care of my mom, looking out for her, keep her company. And look, I love it. I love my mom. But, I feel a little bit of like, you got to take care of her. You got to look out for her. So usually on Saturday nights, the family and we all go out to dinner with my mom, and it is clockwork. It's me and the kids. It's my mom. Sometimes the rest of my family, but my mom is always there every Saturday. And the funny thing is, she always sends a message asking if we're on for dinner every Saturday. And of course, we are. So Saturday rolls around, and my mom texts us, early. There's like a big family group chat, like most people have these days. And she texts all of us, letting us know that she's going for a long walk. I mean, she does these things all the time. We're always like, hey, look, we love that you do these 8-mile weird hikes through the wilderness, but, just let us know where you're at. And we also all have like Find My Friends and all that stuff on for her phone. So she sends us a text, and she's like, hey, going for a walk. And I'm like, yeah, whatever. We all kind of thumbs up it or whatever. And by the way, if you're listening to this and you're like, what the heck? My mom's almost 70. Like I said, she's by herself now, trying to be a good son. And so, look, she goes for her walk. A few hours later, she texts and says, hey, everyone, I'm back. And we're like, yeah, whatever. Just kind of ignore it, thumbs up, whatever. And later on, it's Saturday evening, and we're all getting ready to head to dinner, but never heard from my mom. Never heard that text, never heard. And I was like, that's kind of strange. I was like, well, let me text her. Hey, we still on for dinner? No response. I'm like, okay, some time goes by. And look, there's a grace period. I don't need immediate responses in text. Come on, we got to eradicate that from how we communicate over text anyway. But, some time goes by, a little over an hour. And I'm like, that's weird. No response. Text her again. And you can at the person to kind of like push a notification. Nope, don't see her. And so I pull up Find My Phone or Find My Friends, whatever. And I see her phone. And sure enough, it's right where she went on her walk. And I'm like, damn it, Mom. She lost her phone. I mean, look, the other week she lost her keys. She's losing stuff lately. It's, I'm getting a little uneasy. So I start communicating to the rest of the fam, and I'm like, great. We're all kind of like a little uneasy. Where is she? Is she okay? Is she alive? And I'm kind of panicking, like most people are. Like you start to play out scenarios in your head. And I'm like, damn it. My mom, she's lost. Oh no, what if she got into an accident on the way back? I've been wanting to get her a new car lately. I'm like, what is happening? What's happening? Oh no. Okay, so I reach out to my brothers. I'm texting everyone. The family at large, the immediate family here. So I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna go find this phone. I see where it is. It's in this little plaza. It looks like. So we all pile in the car. We start to look for her, and every second, my mind's kind of building up other scenarios. I'm like, where is she? Did she get lost? Is she hurt? Again, she lost her keys the other day. So we get to where we're supposed to be. I'm in the plaza now, and I'm looking for her phone, and I got the kids with me, and they're all like, what's going on? And everyone's like, oh, Dad's trying to focus. And I'm very angry now, but I'm quiet. I'm one of those people that like the angrier I get, the more like content and quiet I get to. But I'm livid, and I'm just ready to find her. So I got the Find My Phone up. I see your phone. It's there. It's blinking. It's live. It says it's happening. I'm approaching it, and I'm like, oh, I bet someone dropped it off in this cocktail restaurant in the plaza. Okay, cool. So I walk inside, and I'm like, hey, did anyone turn a phone in here? Like, no, we don't have anything. We don't have a phone. No, sorry, or whatever. And I'm like, okay, shit. Someone's here with her phone, And then Elizabeth's like, maybe it's in the trash can outside. And like, maybe she accidentally threw it away, and I'm like, really? I don't know if she'd do that. I'm like, okay, you know what? So I call my brothers and they're like, guys, this is stuff's going a little bit crazy here. I'm going to find mom. We're going to find her phone. Still haven't heard from her again. Text her again. No response. And I'm losing it. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to call her phone again. I bet it's in this trash can. I'll call. I can hear it if it's ringing, and that's hopefully she has her ringer on. She doesn't. And so I'm like rolling up my sleeves. I'm like, I bet it's in the trash can because that's the closest place where it is outside of this restaurant. And I call it and it's in my hand and it's ring, ring. And then all of a sudden, hi, honey. I'm like, Mom, where are you? What's happening? She was at the cocktail spot with her friend getting ready for a concert. I'm like, what the fuck? I'm such a dumbass. I could not bear to think that my mom is getting a social life again, that she has other friends, and she's fine. She was as happy as she could be, sipping a frozen margarita, hanging out with her friend Julie. I'm an idiot. I got a frozen margarita too. All right. Hard pivot. Big pod this week. Forget the stories, but I know you all like them. There's your story. Let's get into the guest. Big pod with one of my favorite brands. This is a brand that I feel like for some people it's under the radar unless you're in the outdoor world. But I've seen more and more people I know wear Outdoor Research lately, just as like fashion stuff. Whether it's GORP things, it's all in there, and it's been great. So my guest this week is the VP of Design and Product Innovation, Kat Schoewe. And we get into how she got into design. We talk about the wild rise of GORP-core, what it means to be a fashion brand without calling yourself one, which is a very interesting chat. And our deep love of thrifting. We also talk about why Outdoor Research has just this ginormous following in Japan. It was everywhere in Japan. But we get into all of it. It's a banger. Glad you're here. Call your mom, everybody. All right, see ya. Thank you for joining. How are you doing? You said this is like one of your first pods here?
Yeah, I think it might be my second ever. So I don't do this very often. I'm a pretty private person and pretty busy at work. So I don't. I'm not often the brand facing side of OR, but I'm happy to talk to you.
OR being Outdoor Research.
Yes.
Which is, I mean, you have quite the. What is your exact title? It's like.
I started out as a senior creative director, design director, but I am currently the vice president of design, innovation, and materials.
Okay.
So I oversee all of our design teams, and that's teams that design both the inline product for Outdoor Research and also our tactical product that we make for the U.S. military and for the NATO troops. And then we also have a small but mighty innovation team that works on advanced concepts and brings products to market on a much longer cadence. So problems that we're trying to solve, 3-5 years out, and that tinkering maker mentality. And then finally, we have a materials team that really works on bringing innovative fabrics from, building new laminates and composite materials to improving some of the existing fabrics, working with key mills that we work with both here in the U.S. like Gore-Tex and also overseas with some key partners on really bringing our material technology to life and telling those cohesive stories. So in my role, I really have the soup to nuts of the front end of the product process. How building the dream, the creative direction, then having that innovation and advanced concept work that supports the technical and problem solving side of that dream. And then designers and material developers who bring that vision to life. And then we pass it on to our wonderful commercialization and development teams who work with factories, including our own factory here in the U.S. In Seattle, and commercialize those products that you see on OR's website and at REI and at some of our other partners.
Yeah, I mean that is holy moly. So you got a busy day. I'm glad you made time for us.
It's not a small job, and it's been it's been a growing role as OR has been growing. So we've been over the last when I joined 6 years ago, we were a small to mid-size outdoor brand with a 40-year history. And over the course of the last 6 years, we've done a ton. We've had some monumental shifts in our brand positioning. We rebranded back in 2020 in the height of the pandemic. We decided to change our logo and rebrand all of our consumer-facing touch points. So that's, from the fonts on our site and all of the point to consumer branding to on garment branding, including our logo and brand mark and all of our verbiage. So that was a huge undertaking.
Holy moly!
Yeah, we launched our sustainability efforts with our commitment to become carbon neutral by 2025. We launched during the pandemic. We launched PPEs, so we started making masks here in Seattle, which is a whole other story, a really fun one. And then we also spearheaded this hands-on approach to really go back to our founders' DNA, and so we launched an in-house maker lab and built out this new process for advanced concept work that takes an 18-month process and really brings in those consumer insights and allows us to bring in true innovation by hands-on ideation, by designers being able to create mock-ups and do that true innovation of trial, test, fail, trial, test, fail, trial, test, fail until you find a solution that really works.
Yeah, I mean, it's been just a gargantuan shift with the brand lately. But I mean, before we get into your backstory, I think the one thing that I'm the most curious and excited about is for me, I grew up in the Midwest. Mm-hmm. And I remember outdoor research, but now my relationship with outdoor research is more of and forgive me if I say this, it's more of this fashion relationship to where I'm wearing a lot of OR stuff in more I'm not buying it. I'll say this, I'm not buying it for its technical abilities, even though it's fantastic. I'm now buying this brand as well as our many other listeners and other friends of mine for, this kind of, I'm going to air quote this word, the whole GORP-y sort of look now. And this kind of outdoor aesthetics that are also incorporated into fashion. And the funny thing is I have more people ask me about my outdoor research stuff than anyone that asks me about this crazy Japanese brand I'm wearing or this designer brand or this. And so, before we get too crazy, I am kind of curious how you've navigated the fact that OR has become, a fashion brand as well as just an incredibly good outdoor brand.
So no apology needed for the fashion word. I love that our brand is having a following and that that people are wearing it for multiple uses. I think at the root of this brand is problem solving and and building authentic products that are authentic to our brand DNA. The fact that people are loving that authentic DNA and that it resonates beyond the end use just warms my heart. It makes me really, really happy. And I don't know how much you know about the history of OR. Growing up in the Midwest, you probably remember us for the X-Gators and the Baker mitts from the 80s. OR was founded over 40 years ago, so founded in 1980. Ron Gregg was climbing, the founder was climbing Denali, and at about 12,000 feet up the side of the Denali, he watched his climbing partner get carried off the mountain and airlifted because he was suffering frostbite. And so that ended that adventure for both of them. And Ron skied down the mountain. He skied 100 miles down solo, and decided at that point that he really wanted to solve the problem of frostbite on footwear. And so he went back to the lab and created the X-Gator, which is one of our iconic products and probably what you remember from your early days. I have one of our Croc Gators, which is the second generation of the X Gator, in my garage because, while I was working in fashion on 7th Avenue in the early 2000s, late 90s.
This Anna Sui days?
Yeah, Anna Sui and Nicole Miller. Always,
oh my God,
always
so good.
Yeah, always building outerwear. But I met this pretty handsome ice climber architect who ended up becoming my husband, and he had X Gators and he had Baker mitts that he picked up at the Seattle REI on his way up Denali in the late 90s. Those still live in my garage. So that and they're alive and well. I mean, we're using a lot more modern gear right now, and he's doing a lot less ice climbing. But as it happens to all of us, but that brand legacy really lives within OR, and it doesn't live in that like heritagey way, in the way that brands like LL Bean or Eddie Bauer or Filson treat their legacy in a pretty kind of precious way. We think of that legacy more as an approach to building products. So that means, approach to problem solving real outdoor problems and arriving with these technical solutions, and prototyping and field testing and bringing things to market that really, are authentically ours. I actually had the opportunity last year, or my team had the opportunity last year to redesign that Croc Gator, and redesign the Baker mitt, which I was just like, oh my God. I mean, how do you approach that? How do you go into something that dates back to the 90s that was beloved by snowboarders and climbers alike? And, and something you have in your closet from 25 years ago, and update that for the modern day. And that leads me to actually your question, which is we take the spirit of that problem solving, but then we actually apply new technologies, new design solutions, and build something that's authentic, but also has a little bit more style, has that combination of, and that's what my team's been doing for the last 6 years, is taking a brand that has been known. One of our product managers used to joke that we were function meets function. And 6, 7, 8, 10 years ago, that would have absolutely been the case. Now we are very much driving toward function and performance meets style, and incorporating that modern aesthetic and a very authentic aesthetic for OR into our product. So we're not trying to be overtly fashionable. We're just being authentic to ourselves while modernizing and making sure that the products that we're putting out there perform just as well, on top of Denali or on top of Hood, where I'm headed in a couple of weeks, to the streets of New York, and your casual hike in Seattle, or walking your dog. The performance has to be authentic at that pinnacle use, but then how do we make sure that the aesthetic actually translates? The GORP-core trend is pretty phenomenal, and that we're all seeing very technical gear, and in Tokyo and in Soho being worn by people who have never been on the mountain. And it's amazing. And I'm so happy for it, because they're wearing the best gear out there. And if they ever do get caught in a rainstorm, they're going to stay dry. They have a great hood that's helmet compatible in case they ever do want to pop into a climbing gym, or go on a side of a wall somewhere. So yeah, it's a blast to watch it, but also, and where relevance is really important. We're not sitting in a dark room in Seattle coming up with these concepts. All of us are traveling. All of us are seeing what's happening in the market. I'm in Tokyo a few times a year. I'm in Seoul a few times a year. I'm in London a few times a year. I love to see what's happening in terms of street style, in terms of fashion, and what people are wearing, and I'm very much inspired by what's happening in terms of an evolution of outdoor style, and how it's driving how it's driving maybe more heritage brands like us, or traditional brands like us to evolve and to get outside of our comfort zone and to try new things. So never chasing things that are not functional, never chasing things that are superfluous, but just incorporating a little bit more style into our build.
Wait a second. I got to get my bids in on the Bezel app, but more on that in a minute. I get all sorts of emails and questions from you all, which I love to read and respond. And one thing I constantly get, and even read in the Blamo Slack, is what watch should I buy and where should I get it? It's a wild world out there with all sorts of websites and shops, but I go to Bezel. Bezel is the trusted marketplace for buying and selling your next luxury watch with expert in-house authentication on every purchase. First off, folks, it's getbezel.com. That's getbezel.com. But I use and recommend Bezel because it's the best of both worlds. You can go to the site and browse a marketplace of luxury watches, over 16,000 of them, by the way, which is a lot. And I know that Bezel is going to authenticate your purchase. Or you can create an account and get connected with your own private client advisor, called the concierge. Because look, making a watch purchase can be confusing, especially when you don't know all the reference numbers. When was this made? Did they use ceramic then? Is it a triple lop, dingle top? What the heck? I don't even know. But they do at Bezel, and they're here to help. Concierge, baby. Look, if looking for your watch to mark a special occasion, or maybe you're just doing research, right? They even have their own journal where you can learn all the ins and outs about Bezel and the brands and all the stuff that's happening right now. But back to my bids. Yes, Bezel now has auctions, and not just any auctions. They got Rolex, they got Cartier, they got Audemars Piguet, all the big dogs and more. So you can discover, bid, and know the Bezel team has got your back with verified in-house authentication. So visit getbezel.com on your smartphone or computer. Bezel, the trusted marketplace for buying or selling your next luxury watch. Yeah, I mean, I think one of the two things that really, strike me as you look at a lot of outdoor brands and brands like LL Bean, brands like Eddie Bauer, brands that really lean on a heritage. And I think the interesting thing to me is a lot of these brands now sell their product not based around the innovation or how advanced it is. I'm kind of air quoting that. It's more on like, hey, we made this stuff for 100 years and it's still good. And I don't think that's bad, but I think the fact that like you guys have never really leaned on like, hey, this was the thing that was made a long time ago and here's this old catalog and we're going to reprint it and we're going to, it always feels like it's looking forward. And I think that focus in a weird way keeps people from ever viewing it as a brand that's a 40-plus-year-old brand. So it always feels new. And I think like it feels like that's a very specific decision that was made to ensure that didn't happen. Were you a part of that, or is that something you continue to push?
It's definitely just part of, as we think about ourselves as passionate innovators and engineers and makers, we always look forward. That's the research and outdoor research. We while we have reverence for our history and for things like, we still have a Seattle rain hat in our line that used to be the Seattle sombrero. And that's been in the line for probably 35 years. But it's been updated. We've brought it along. We've changed the fabric to be more sustainable. We've changed some of the elements of the sweatband to be more comfortable. We've changed the lining of it. We continue to iterate even on products that are those iconic products. The Croc Gator is a great example of that. When we redesigned it, our design manager, Barrett, who is an incredible designer, I'm so blessed to work with him. He brought it along with using a new Gore-Tex 3-layer fabric with new abrasion-resistant Cordura, so bringing in new material technology that evolves it. But then also, he looked at the problems and he was like, well, the old X-Gator and the old Croc were great, but the strap is the thing that's a failure point, and is not field repairable. And how do I create a field repairable strap? So he went through multiple ideations of 3D printing PU instep straps and different solutions for how to create an instep strap that is easily removable, and if it breaks, you can buy a new one, or you can use a bungee cord to actually retrofit that same design and still use your gator. Again, having some reverence for the past, but then also saying,
nothing's too precious.
No,
right?
Nothing's too precious. And you have to keep innovating, and you have to keep bringing newness to the market. Our space is so flooded with private label brands and imitators, honestly, who will come in and will find a way to build it for less, out of lesser materials, at a lesser cost. And so for us, we have to continue to drive innovation and drive newness forward, to continue to grow as a brand. And we are growing as a brand, which is really a blessing.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing I noticed too, and I'm curious about this, is certain brands, they'll be like, oh, we're being viewed as a fashion brand. Well, let's actually just make a little fashion vertical within our brand so we can focus on this and leverage it. And it feels like, and I think this has been to your gain, that the fact that you haven't acknowledged it too much, I feel like has let it grow even more, because it's not, and I'll just say this, it's not like, oh, we're going to make Valence. This is like our city. This is our super high end. It's going to be more expensive. It's going to be this. You're like, this is outdoor research. Here it is. We're not telling you where to wear it or how to wear it, but like, this is the full gambit. And I just think that's really interesting.
Yeah. I mean, and we have, we lean into silhouettes that are more trend, but they're always within our line and in the same technical materials, solving the same problems, but maybe just for that more modern customer who is looking for something a little less traditional. That's certainly, in our assortment, and more of it is coming. But we're never going to say, you know what, now we're going to make it out of cotton modal and it's going to be just for lounging in your backyard. That's not our brand.
Is that a decision you also made, where you're just like, no? Because I assume this conversation's come up at some point. It's like, well, hey, should we make a non-outdoor research brand? Because we might as well make something for everyone, right? Or is it just like, no?
We went through as the leadership team. We went through some offsites and spent some time really, and around our 40th anniversary, actually, rediscovering our roots and making sure that we were all aligned on who we were as a brand. And so out of that came, just like many brands come with mission, vision, values. For us, it's trusted gear to thrive outside. As our mission statement for us, that has meant being very inclusive to somebody who is on the side of a mountain, or somebody who is really engaging in that activity at a technical level. But it's also somebody who is doing a casual day hike, somebody who's trying to find weather protection in a city while they're commuting. Like, those are all activities where you're thriving outside, but you are thriving outside. So we're not indoor research, and we never will be. And then coming out of that, we often have discussions as we're looking at a new fabric or a new product. Is it solving a problem? What problems is it solving? And and really testing ourselves on, are we talking to ourselves? Is it, a duffel or a tote also solves a problem? And how do we build in features into those items that that allow the user to go further and to have a more enjoyable time outside at whatever level they are. So that's, that idea of why we made this is at the core of everything we do. Launching off of that, this idea of field tested and athlete informed is another really important aspect of what we do. We work with a group of ambassadors who are incredible. Some of them are, world-class skiers. Some of them are mountain bikers who are in world-class competitions all over the world. Some of them are climbers. And then some of them also come out of our military and are our special forces partnerships and give us insights into the product that helps to evolve that product forward, to help build a better mousetrap, so to speak.
Yeah.
So,
well, what's interesting, earlier you said athlete informed.
mm-hmm.
And I think the reason why I've always really respected OR and also been a person who wears a lot of it. I mean, I look over there, I have a bunch of so this hat, which people see me wear all the time. I mean, it's not a new hat. But I mean, I'm sure it was probably maybe from one of your brand refreshes or whatever, but like I wear it all the time. I've worn it with a suit. I've worn it with, I have like a little, like little gilet, whatever, a down vest and stuff that I'll wear with it and stuff too. And I think the thing about it, and this is why I'm kind of like so curious about this, is because you said athlete informed. You're not like a brand where, like, let's just say Nike, right? So Nike, ACG, all sorts of stuff. Incredible team, very smart designers. I'm not throwing shade on them, but I
know some of them. They're phenomenal people.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I mean, there's Nike folks that listen to the show, but like Nike to me has always been an athlete-led brand in the sense that you have LeBron James or Michael Jordan or this athlete or this golfer or this. And so oftentimes when you're purchasing the brand, you're aligning with this specific athlete. And I think now as consumers or people my age don't really want to align themselves to a specific individual. They want a brand, and because that brand can mean like 800 different things, where I feel like there's almost this disdain for brands that are run like this, which I feel like many people have then found outdoor research, not because of, oh, you're aligned with this super athlete, or you're aligned with this type of fashion thing, or this type of, the fact that like it seems, I mean, obviously there is a focus, but it almost seems that like so general that there's different entry points across the brand. And so you can make it your own, I think has been one of the biggest advantages. And so I'm always kind of curious about this because, you're aware of athletes, you've had opportunities and you do work with them, but nothing is ever the front and center like driver of either a brand campaign or even a specific item.
Yeah, no, I agree with you completely. I think part of that is our brand has a pretty low ego, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of what I was getting at, because I was like, like, how do I say that without sounding like I'm like picking at it?
No. It's actually a pride point. We're pretty humble. We're learners, and the way that we work with athletes is, we have when we think about our end uses, and we work with some incredible athletes, and we focus on the end use and focus on having a number of athletes in that end use that they come into our offices in Seattle a couple of times a year, and we focus with them on the problems that we're trying to solve, because we use them as our kind of premier wear testers. And so our athletes our ski athletes are skiing in our kits, our mountain bike athletes are riding in our kits, and then they're coming back every 6 months or so, and sometimes more often. And we're doing these ideation whiteboard sessions, literally sitting in our lab with a dry erase board and going through things that are working on their gear, things that are not working on their gear, things that they're enjoying, and things that are a hindrance, failure points, and areas where we think we need to make improvements, and then wish lists. What if we build this, and involving them in that design process, in that ideation process, as an inform, as an input, as a partner in that ideation, and then our designers take that intel, along with intel from our other wear testers who are not professional athletes, and from from our customers who are using the product, and then they go through the process of filtering that into that problem-solving approach to the product. And then once that product is built, our athletes become our wear testers again, and they're the first ones to put it on and wear it on mountain or wear it in their daily life. They're the first ones to give us feedback on it. I have a and iPhone messages full of screenshots of texts of athletes saying, including, we had an athlete named Graham Zimmerman a few years back who was on the side of a mountain at Lanksar in Pakistan, trying to climb a mountain, and he was wearing one of our puffers called the Super Alpine, and didn't really like the way that the zipper was working, and so he sent us a little video from his sat phone of like,
Wow.
I know you're bringing this to market, but I really need you to fix this thing because this placket is really driving me crazy. Can you just fix this detail? And we immediately went out to the factory with an email and very quickly fixed a pretty simple detail that was in that very extreme environment causing a problem for the athlete. And so that's we're not calling it the Graham Zimmerman jacket. We're not,
Right.
But he definitely helped us to build a better product through that input. And the same happens on a daily basis. And that's why it's a little, it's humble in that, this is not a hero story. This is this is just how we work with many of our athletes, where they're coming to us with feedback, with problems to solve, with ideas, and then they're the first ones to try them, and they're the first ones to tell us if it works, if it doesn't. If it doesn't, we'll go back to the drawing board or, ideate some more. And those gators that I talked about earlier in our conversation, those probably went through 3 or 4 rounds of field testing, including the first prototype going out into the field with both wear testers and athletes before we said, this is good enough to put out in the market and to sell commercially to somebody who's going to pay their well-earned money for it. We have a performance warranty. We stand behind everything we make, and so we, as a brand, we really have to think long and hard before we put something out in the market to make and test it to make sure that it's not going to disappoint somebody. And when it does, we will make good on our promise.
Well, on that, you said hard-earned money.
Yeah.
So, and I'm pulling this up on my own here just to verify. Like, your products are around anywhere from like 15 to 25, in some cases 30, 35% in some cases, cheaper than a lot of the other brands of people I know. But I think your stuff is just as good. So is there a decision that's like, hey, we need, is it just like, hey, we're just not going to be so greedy? Or is there a decision among you all where it's like, we need to be at this level? Because in a lot of ways, and I think that this is it sounds so weird to say, and obviously, you've worked in fashion and stuff before. You could easily be charging a lot more for this, and I think people would still pay for it. But you don't. And I feel like having it be more accessible and affordable to a lot of people at different price points in a way makes the brand feel cooler, but not in a way that was like, say, like the Gap, right? Like the Gap has lost a lot of the sexiness. I'm not asking for you to comment on it, but Outdoor Research, and I think it's just because you guys just don't really embrace any of these kind of luxury or fashion sex. It's like, well, yeah, this hat, I think I got this hat for like $35.
Yeah, it's the Swift cap.
It's great.
Yeah.
And I have a couple of them. I wear them all the time, but it's, I have a Stone Island hat. Love the brand. Huge fan of Stone Island. That's like $180 hat. So, Stone Island looks itself as a fashion luxury brand. You guys obviously are not. Why aren't you just being like, hey, you know what? We're going to start charging more for this. We appreciate your input. We're going to make this Grant's jacket. He wants an extra zipper. We're going to charge an extra $100 on the jacket. Who is the person that says no?
Well, I think it goes back to that our mission statement, which is trusted gear for all to thrive outside. And if you think about inclusivity in the outdoors, the outdoors, 20, 30 years ago, when I first started working in this industry, was a pretty exclusive place. It was highly technical products for people who can only be on top of the mountain, who are willing to pay big bucks for Gore-Tex jackets to be on top of that mountain. Gear is very expensive. Expeditions are very expensive. And it's important for us for people to have an access point into the outdoors. at the same time, we build things for what they cost us to build and make a reasonable margin that makes us profitable, and we continue to build a business this way. In my 6 years here, I don't remember a time when we've said, you know what, this is a trend, we can charge $40 more for it. Let's do it and let's make the margin. It's really about building products that are great and functional, and at the same time that people can access them, and then more people can get into the outdoors. More people can enjoy those products. When you make $130 hat, and I love Stone Island, don't get me wrong.
Yeah, sure. No shade.
But, not a lot of people can afford that. Not a lot of people can go out into the outdoors, and then it becomes a status symbol, right? It becomes a mark of what you can pay for, rather than a mark of a great performance product. So for us, it's really about building things for everybody to be able to get out there and have fun and wear these products, and for them not to fail them. And that's, it costs a certain amount of money for us to make that hat.
Sure, for sure.
We're not going to double charge you for it, and mark it up a crazy amount.
Yeah, I feel like that, and obviously, like some of this stuff was almost rhetorical in the sense that I think there are a lot of younger designers and people that listen to the show, and and obviously a ton of different consumers, where they're like, hey, I'm starting this outdoor brand, or I'm starting this type of brand. And I think a lot of them are like, the only way for me to grow is to more or less start as a luxury brand. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't know if you think about it, like of all the new brands that have started over even just the past 15 or 20 years, most of them choose to start as a luxury brand. Mm-hmm. And I don't know why that is, but they'll choose to be that brand. And I think in a lot of ways, because there's not the like brand equity, right? Or the time that's assigned to that brand that can then evolve into being a luxury brand. I'm like, what? You're just a brand that has a Shopify and like a logo of I'm making this up, like a fish and a horse flying in the air, and so you're a luxury brand? Like it seems so interesting to me that there aren't people that's like, you know what, I'm going to just do an outdoor brand or whatever it is, and I'm going to be available to everyone. I don't know. And maybe it's because a lot of things are VC backed now. I'm not sure. I'm curious what your thoughts might be. You
bring up a really good point, which is, we are privately held. We are still, we still have the luxury of not having to report to Wall Street, not the luxury of not having to show crazy numbers every season and grow in such an exponential way. And so what that means is being able to have responsible governance and and building the right products. And again, no shade on PE owned brands, no shade on Wall Street owned brands. I've worked. Don't worry. I've worked for both. I've in my time between large privately held family owned brands like L.L. Bean and brands like Izumi that were owned by large multinational corporations, Under Armour, which was obviously publicly held. I've seen many different models, and I think that there is a quiet luxury to being a mid-size outdoor brand that sticks to its guns and sticks to its heritage, and has a governance structure that supports that choice to hold on to being a performance brand. That doesn't mean that we don't chase trend or that we're not going to be trend relevant. It just means that we're not going to chase luxury and pretend to be something we're not. Yeah.
I want to talk a bit about some of the Japanese stuff that you talked about. So, I mean, you go to Japan a lot. And for me, outdoor research is everywhere in Japan. A lot of the fashion folks in Japan that I follow, they're all into outdoor research. What do you think happened there that made that happen?
I'm not sure, actually.
That's okay. That's fine.
Yeah, I think we're this quiet brand that people have discovered. I'll tell you a really funny story. So I have teenagers at home. I'm a mom, and I was one of my coworkers whose teenage son is a pretty cool kid. Comes home one day and says, "Dad, I discovered this." This person doesn't work at OR, by the way. I discovered this really cool new outdoor brand. It's called Outdoor Research. And the dad was like, oh my God. You know? So I think we're discoverable because we're not everywhere. We're not oversaturated in the market.
Yeah.
And we are unique. And so I think, with the GORP-core trend and with people discovering new brands that are, that maybe have a different story to tell or a different message to tell. We're this silent killer, this quiet brand that is creeping into trends, and I'm really I'm humbled by it, but I'm enjoying it. Yeah, no, and I love seeing OR in the wild, and how people are wearing it and accessorizing it. We have this hat called the Sunrunner, which we've had in the line forever, and it's like it's not unlike the Swift hat you have, but then it has a cape. And that was so dorky 5-6 years ago, and then it became this amazing trend that all of a sudden people were gravitating towards and wearing as a fashion item, and then all of a sudden people are knocking us off and building these caped hats that we've been building forever, and to go back to your earlier question, we saw that trend and we were like, great, we'll sell more Sunrunners. We didn't say, oh my God, we now have to make a, $150 Sunrunner with a reflective logo on it and collab with somebody, to sell this luxury item. It was like, great. It's now people are wearing Sunrunners. That's fabulous. And imitation is the highest form of flattery.
Yeah. My grandma used to have, maybe it was the Sunrunner, but she had like a strawberry patch in her backyard, and she would grow stuff, and she always had this huge hat with, it was almost like I always remember you remember the urban sombrero, the like Seinfeld thing. Yeah. It was this giant, huge sun hat, and then it had like a thing on the back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I was like, what is that? And it was an outdoor research hat. I don't know if what version or whatever it was. I mean, unfortunately, she's no longer with me to even communicate it. But like seeing more people wearing that, and it's funny in Japan. I think not the last trip, but the previous trip, we were there and it was pretty hot, and I saw a lot of folks, and they were wearing like Keen, which I think is another kind of similar, vibe, where it was like Keen and then outdoor research, or because North Face Purple Label is obviously its own world out there, and it looks great. And it's funny because I was like, oh, okay, well that thing's gonna be really expensive. But then it's like, oh, well, that the outdoor research stuff is not. And it's just, I think why I was kind of hammering on this so much is because I feel like so many people feel like any outdoor brand or even just like fashion brand, it has to be X price point. And maybe Carhartt, but even then Carhartt has Whip. Which is its own kind of sub-brand of like fashion stuff. I mean, have you guys had opportunities to collab with certain people, and then you've just been like, we're going to have to find some other margin somewhere. Maybe we just don't.
We don't do a ton of collaborations. We've done a few athlete collaborations, and then we've collaborated with a couple of small, interesting brands over the years. But fashion collaborations has not been on, not been a priority for us in the past few years, because we've been growing, and we've really been focused on making sure that we first shore up our authenticity with this, with our new, our brand DNA and our values, and that we're, that we're building the right product. And oftentimes collaborations can dilute the brand. And so for us, it's about finding the right partners. We're having some conversations with a few folks on doing it, but I don't know, for us, it has to be really right. It has to be brand appropriate, and not have us chase something that maybe will not resonate with our brand identity and who we are. So, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No. It makes perfect sense. I mean, I get it. I think there's a lot of other brands now where it's like, oh, well, here, we're going to collab with this brand, and then that'll elevate us to now this new price point. And you can see it. There's a handful of brands out there where they started at X price point, but because of A and B collab, they're now at, C price point.
Yeah. And don't get me wrong. There are people that I would love to collaborate with, but it has to be the right partnership.
Oh, anyone you're okay to name?
Nope.
No, that's okay. Yeah, because in my head, I'm like, God, it'd be cool to see a Junior collab, maybe an Orally collab.
Oh my God, you're speaking my language.
Right? Oh, I'm sure it's somewhere out there. Other stuff I want to chat. I mean, to get a little bit about some of your because you have a very specific viewpoint from this, and the fact that you've walked in the outdoor world, but also in a lot of the fashion world. Did you start at Anasui or like in your earlier career?
That was my first job. I was still at FIT. I literally was my first job out of school. So yeah,
hell of a brand.
hell of a brand. And I was there for the fall 27 collection. Was my first inroads into the fashion world. Yeah, no, I kind of my journey is a really interesting one. So I'm European. I grew up in Eastern Europe, and some of my earliest memories are connected to fashion in a pretty mnemonic way. My grandmother was a merchandiser for a fashion footwear company in Europe, and I literally lived in her walk-in closet. So she had this walk-in closet that was organized by the color spectrum. So she had her like white wool coats, and then ivory wool coats, and then cream and khaki and taupe and chocolate and burgundy and so on. And then underneath on top of every coat, on the top shelf, she would have a hat that matched that coat. And on the bottom, she would have a purse that was coordinated and a pair of shoes. And in the purse was a color coordinated, not matching lipstick. So I learned from the best. And that really, really like that. I can viscerally still see those beautiful wool coats and Macintosh coats and trench coats, and it just fed my love of outerwear, and I became obsessed with outerwear when we moved to New York when I was an early teen. I went to a conservatory of art school in Queens and knew that I wanted to go to FIT from, I think I was maybe 10 when I proclaimed that. So it's not everybody has that like vision of this is what I want to do with my life, but I knew exactly what I wanted to do, and that I wanted to be in in this industry, and specifically that I wanted to build beautiful outerwear, and that I specialized in outerwear at FIT, and then was really lucky to get some of those early, very low level assistant jobs at Anasui, where you're literally like running to the fabric store and picking up fabric and then taking it to the sample room and taking patterns to the cutter and sitting and just absorbing all the things that are happening around you. I was really lucky to work for Nicole Miller when she was launching outerwear. So she
huge,
yeah. So I as a designer that loves that type of product, I got to work with leather and suede, and I got to build these beautiful wool trench coats, just like the ones that my grandma wore, and Macs and duffel coats, and just like work on these beautiful bespoke garments that were going onto the runway shows, but then also understand how to commercialize them for our retail partners at a much more accessible price point in the ready-to-wear collections. And so that's you learn a lot when you work in that type of an environment on what it takes to build that the runway item versus how do we then take it down into a ready-to-wear product. And then I told you I met this ice climber architect, and then my true outdoor journey began when I started making technical outerwear products that were seam taped, and I built my first garment with Gore-Tex, and I just fell in love with this, and I just couldn't get enough. And so I started the journey into more outdoor versus fashion through the lens of performance, and building more and more performance garments that, where I could really build that problem-solving technical feature into that garment. And that's what I've spent the last 20 years doing. From 7th Avenue into the old Land's End that still built. I was building Gore-Tex jackets and working with Polar Tech and doing really cool technical things in the pre-Sears years. Then
golden era,
and then and then I was really lucky to meet the chief merchant at L.L. Bean, who basically convinced me to get on the plane and go to Maine and convinced me to come work for them. And so I spent almost a decade of my life in Maine at L.L. Bean, building all of their technical, this great heritage brand that was also evolving and building technical products. And so we were building, building waterproof down jackets and introducing really great GOR products to market. I had some really fun collaboration moments. Actually, you would enjoy this one. We worked with Beams on some collaborations around our bean boots and making these candy colored bean boots. And footwear was one of my categories, so I got to work on that. That was really quite a moment for them. I've had the pleasure of working for really great performance brands that were really technical, like Izumi and Under Armour. And always that red thread of problem solving and outerwear has been there for me. So,
did you ever find yourself, especially now that you're very submerged in the technical stuff, do you still feel drawn to any of the more traditional things, or have you do you work with any tailors now for maybe your own personal wardrobe? Or
yes and yes. So I love bespoke tailoring techniques and and traditional craft. And there are ways to incorporate that into technical garments too. In fact, we have an amazing pattern maker on our team. It's not a normal thing for your mass produced
usually
outdoor
it's
products.
CAD and some lasers.
No, we have an amazing pattern maker who helps us build in things like lift and movement and nice. We spent hours and hours talking about rhombic shifts and and armhole shapes, so I do get to play a little bit in that space here at OR, but I also my personal closet is certainly a collection of things that I've collected over the years, including vintage pieces that are just beautifully made. I have aspirations of maybe incorporating some more of those traditional materials in a technical way into some of our outdoor products. We're starting to do some more bonded wools, and we have this new Ranger collection that has a little bit of that outdoor life component to it, and so starting to pepper that in a little bit, but again, always through the lens of performance. Wool isn't the ultimate, first and foremost, the ultimate performance material, and so how do we bring it into garments that are high performance garments? But
I used to try to. At one point, I really wanted this perfect aquascutum.
Mm-hmm.
It was like the Cary Grant jacket. It might have been from North by Northwest or whatever, but it was because there was, I think he did another movie called Walk Don't Run, which was he did in Japan, and he had a really cool trench in there. And I was trying to find what it was, and I had all these different people, and his daughter, she's will occasionally respond to emails about things that he owned. And she was like, "Oh yeah, it's aquascutum," and I was like, "Okay." And so I was trying to find it, and I went and I bought 6 different aquascutum coats on eBay, and I'm like, "Is this the one? Is this the one?" Because at that time, for Cary Grant nerds or whatever, he was more interested in ready to wear than custom, because for him, the fact that you could just walk into a store and see something and literally walk out with it on the same day, it was mind blowing to him. And I think for a lot of people, ready to wear was actually more of a luxury than custom and made to measure. But I still in my head, whenever I think of cool coats, I'm always looking for some type of trench, even though none of the ones I have fit me that well, and none of them are really that, they're old and they stink. Yeah, I can't get them clean. So yeah.
No, but they're treasures, right? I mean,
Yeah,
I have
exactly.
Yeah, I have some old Burberrys and an old Mac that I just like. You know that it's been worn with love, and you also know that it's going to last forever, and that it's going to be in your closet long after you're gone because they're just built so beautifully. So
yeah,
and here in Oregon we have Pendleton right down the road, and I'm always finding old blanket coats and these beautiful pieces. So yeah, I'm a little bit of a vintage hound too.
Yeah. Well, wait, hold on. Go ahead. What all vintage stuff do you collect? You said Pendleton.
Oh no, I just it's usually finding the right outerwear pieces. Some old mountain parkas, old hunting jackets, old. I have a couple of old Kelty backpacks from way back when. Some like just those pieces that you find at at the flea, and you're like, oh my god, I just have to own this. So. And now they're becoming, because they're so trend, they've become a lot more expensive. But
yeah. I mean, out of curiosity, and I don't know whether you answer this or not, but like, what do you think is the draw to vintage outdoor stuff? Because now we're at this, fork in the road where, look, you can get a waterproof membrane material, and it's not as insane as it used to be price wise. And there is some stuff that's like, efficiency wise, some of the newer things are an order of magnitude better, but you still see many people gravitating towards like a vintage, coat or fleece, for example. Why do you think that is?
I think it's two things. So one of my favorite pieces I picked up in Korea is an old bomber jacket liner from the Korean War that's been embroidered with it's got like a Snoopy on the back of it, and it's got like all this writing from the bombers, how they used to paint the bombers with both art and insignia of the squadron. So they've basically took this vintage liner, like onion quilted liner, and embroidered those Army insignia or Navy insignia on it. And I get, people stop me on the street. I mean, if I wear it around, people stop me on the street and they're like, where did you get that? And I think it's because it's unique, because it's not, you like we live in the ubiquity of fashion times right now, right? You can walk into, so to the ready to wear comment, you can walk into any store, and buy anything. You can go, click on Instagram and you've got, the thing that everybody wants. And there's no, the oversaturation of the market with things that are accessible means that these things that are more unique, whether it's, something that is a limited edition collaboration or a vintage item that you found, and, and it was a hunt. And you may be the only person that has it in town, and and no one else can get that. There's something very special about that. And so I think
it's called bragging rights.
Yeah. and I do think that's why, the vintage outdoor definitely has a resurgence. I wear a lot of, my team makes fun of me quite a bit because I'm often found in vintage military pants, or,
nice.
Like there's Army Navy cargos is any day of the week. And those things are just like you create an identity around something that is unique to you and can't be found at Nordstrom, REI, all the stores that,
Sure.
where you can just walk in and buy anything.
Yeah. I mean, I think in a lot of ways that's been the stuff that was appealing to me to outdoor research, in the sense, at the time when I was, initially I was the only person in like my crew or whatever, right? It sounds so stupid now I'm saying this out loud, that had this. And they were like, oh, yo, where'd you get that? And at first I was like, do I lie and say that it's vintage? Or do I tell them I just got it at like, REI or whatever? I was just like, what should I do? And I debated, and I was like, maybe I'll just lie and be like, oh yeah, sorry, you've never heard of this brand. Like I used to collect Cloud Veil, which was an outdoor brand for a while, and that they're defunct. And
I have a few of those too.
Yeah, great stuff.
Great stuff.
Really, yeah. But I feel like so much now because you can get everything. It's people are more drawn to things that you can't get, and I recognize the vanity of it all. I mean, but that's fashion in a nutshell, right? So it's just.
Yeah, and I think we all want, fashion is a way for us to express our individual identity, right? It is not just about covering your body. It's about showing the world who you are, what you believe in, what your aesthetic is, and that that's a very unique mix for everybody. It's a mix of brands, it's a mix of vintage, it's a mix of fashion. It's like how do you pepper in your individual recipe of aesthetic to stand out from the crowd and not be so normcore like everybody else. So and I feel like too we're now at this time where having air quoting like old clothes is just as cool as having new clothes. Where case in point, I'm driving my daughter to school and I was like, we're gonna have to get you some new pants. You're growing so quick, and she's 7. And I was like, maybe we can, I don't know. I was like, maybe we can go this place and try Stefan and this. And she's like, can I buy clothes that aren't new? And I was like, what? Yeah.
And keep in mind, she's 7.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, what do you mean? And she's like, well, I don't really want any new clothes. And I was like, what is happening?
Oh, yeah.
And she's very much, she wants to, and for her, she's like, well, I want to save the earth, which I'm like, okay, that's great. But she wants older clothes, and my niece, she's very much the same thing where they want to go to thrift stores, they want to buy things on Mercari or Depop or whatever it is to find clothes, and they're mixing stuff that's like, okay, fine, they're getting a new hoodie here or whatever, but everything else is like vintage Levi's or vintage this, and that is now the new sort of flexing stuff of this blend of clothes that's vintage also and stuff that's new. So yeah, I mean, I don't know, but I'm still fascinated by that because maybe it makes me feel super old, but I like that meant you weren't cool if you had old stuff when I was younger. Like, I don't know.
It's definitely a trend. And I have 2 teenage boys, and I see it in my house where they call it going to the bins, which initially I was like, what are the bins? And I'm like, oh, they're thrifting and they are coming. And they have a really good eye. Like there's, you're, yes, I'm very proud. My son's coming home with like really cool pieces from like beautiful wool sweaters to, he came home with a beautiful peacoat the other day. Like there are pieces where I'm like, oh, where did you find that? And it's, so there is that treasure hunt aspect of it and yes, there's also obviously saving of the earth and making sure that the earth is there for us, and we all see the piles of fast fashion that are that are piling up in wastelands of where disposable clothes that fall apart after one use, and and that's where I think outdoor is. I'm proud of having spent my career building outdoor product because we're building products that will last. And now we're building products that will last that are actually, built with better chemistry and built better for the environment. So that's when you're buying a piece of clothing or a piece of gear from an outdoor brand, there's a different expectation of both sustainability and then also long-lasting quality. So I'm hoping that our pieces are going to be those vintage pieces 50 years from now that somebody's going to be pulling out of a bin. Someone's kid is going to be pulling out of a bin and going, ooh, that's really cool, right?
I felt old when I went to the thrift store that my friend was like, oh, you should go to the store, there's some cool stuff. And I looked here, I was like, this is just like Abercrombie. Like, I don't want this. This is not the thing for me. I was like, oh, am I going to find like a 1970s like Lacoste polo? And it's like, nope, it's just Abercrombie. But maybe that's the store I go to. So yeah.
I do love vintage shopping in Tokyo. That is my favorite, all-time favorite thing to do. So I'm fortunate enough to travel to factories 3-4 times a year, and and they're, some of them are in Asia, and on my way I always stop either in Tokyo or in Seoul, and along with some fun shopping and most importantly looking at people watching and seeing street fashion. I'm also digging through what their vintage situation is, and that's fascinating. I can barely afford anything in Japan in their vintage shopping because their Americana is so expensive. But
right.
But it's incredible to see how that mix has really permeated that market. And yes, there are plenty of vintage Abercrombie things, vintage Lacoste things, but also just vintage outdoor pieces that you can't believe that they're in that market. So
yeah. Well, Kat, thank you so much for coming on. This was a huge honor and a pleasure. It was great to meet you.
All right, thanks. Great to meet you.
Bye. You've been listening to Blamo. Our show is produced by Blamo Media. We're edited by Amar Lowell, and our theme music, as always, by the mysterious Breakmaster Cylinder. If you like what you heard, you know the drill. Share the pod with a friend. Leave a review on Apple Podcasts. Give us 5 stars or thumbs up on whatever other thing you're listening to us on, whether it's Dingledorp or Bing Bong, whatever it's called. But you can also follow us on Instagram for all the hot content. If you want to talk to us and give us your hot take, we'd love to hear from you. You can send us an email at info@blamopod.com. Last but not least, super ultra important. If I had a air horn, I would press it right now. You got to come and join us over on Patreon, because the fun never stops over there. Look, the live show, the free show, whatever you want to call this, we take breaks here and there, but Patreon, it never stops. And we also got exclusive shows like Dye Workwear, hosted by Derek Guy and Peter Zotolo, and the Triple J Show, hosted by yours truly with John Moy and Gene DeLeon. There's just a ton of stuff over there. So check it out at patreon.com/Blamo. If not, no worries. We got hundreds and hundreds of free episodes in the feed, and more to come. So we will see you all soon.